do. For all creation sings your song. I will join with them, declaring your glory. We can run straight into your arms, unafraid. 'Cause every time we need you, we're met by love. We can lift our hands to heaven, full of faith. 'Cause every time we worship, we see your face. We can run straight into your arms, unafraid. 'Cause every time we need you, we're met by love. We can lift our hands to heaven, full of faith. 'Cause every time we worship, we see your face. We can run straight into your arms, unafraid. 'Cause every time we need you, we're met by love. We can lift our hands to heaven, full of faith. 'Cause every time we worship, we see your face. We see your face. We see your face. There is no one like you, Lord. You, Lord. There is no one like you, Lord. You, Lord. There is no one like you, Lord. You, Lord. Let's do it one more time. There is no one like you, Lord. You, Lord.
Thank you, Brian.
Do you not know? Have you not heard? Was it not told to you from the beginning? Have you not understood? Since the earth was founded, Yahweh sits above the vaulted roof of the world, and its inhabitants look like grasshoppers. God stretches out the skies like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent for mortals to live under. God reduces the privileged to nothing and throws the rulers of the earth into chaos. No sooner are they planted, no sooner are they sown, no sooner do they take root on earth that God blows on them and they wither, and a storm sweeps them away like chaff. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Yahweh is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. This God does not faint to grow weary, with a depth of understanding that is unsearchable. God gives strength to the weary and empowers the powerless. Young women may grow tired and weary. Young men may stumble and fall, but those who wait for Yahweh find a renewed power. They soar on eagle's wings. They run and don't get weary. They walk and never tire.
So today we're looking at a very interesting and somewhat well-known passage from the book of Isaiah in the Hebrew Bible. That final line, especially, they soar on eagle's wings, they run and don't get weary, they walk and never tire. These are really used on religious greeting cards and cross-stitch patterns and welcome mats for people's homes, you name it. It's sort of a go-to passage for a lot of people, and for good reason. It's a very inspirational passage. And before I dive into this message today, say it with me, a little background on this passage. Now, this section of Isaiah was written within the context of the Babylonian exile, where around 50 years prior to the time of the writing of this passage, the very tiny nation of Judea had been destroyed, including the Jewish temple where Yahweh allegedly sat. And the Hebrew people were taken into exile by the Babylonians for what basically amounted to a generation. It was about 70 years or so that they were in exile, which is, for that period of time, when people died around the age of 35, 40, that was a long stretch of time to be in exile. Now, in hindsight, we can look at the long arc of the biblical history of the Jewish people and see that ultimately they eventually returned to their land, and they did indeed rebuild. But in the cosmology of the time, a defeat like this was not only a defeat of one nation by another nation, but it would have been viewed as a defeat of one people's God by another God. In the eyes of the people of that time, it would have appeared that the God of the Babylonians, whose name was Marduk, that this God soundly defeated the God of the Hebrews, Yahweh. And as a result, the faith of the Hebrew people in their God had been shattered. And we can see in various writings from the Hebrew Bible, like sections of Isaiah, like the book of Lamentations, which is exactly what it is. It's a book of lament of the pain and the suffering that the Jewish people went through in exile. And we can see in these the mental and emotional and spiritual turmoil above us all, looking down on us as if we were bugs. However, the use of grasshoppers as the imagery here, that the imagery of our relationship to the divine, is interesting to me for a few reasons, and not just negative reasons, because grasshoppers are pretty amazing creatures. If you don't know anything about them, actually, weirdly, they sort of match the description of biblical angels from the Hebrew Bible. They have 5 eyes. They have ears on their bellies. Their flashy, iridescent wings ward off predators, and they have an ability to communicate complex information by, rubbing their legs together to make songs, which is pretty cool. But grasshoppers also have the capacity to be incredibly destructive. When certain conditions occur, such as the overcrowding of a grasshopper population, ordinary grasshoppers can transform. They can transform in color, in body size, in temperament, and they become locusts. And these locusts can turn into massive swarms of up to 80 million bugs that can wipe out grain harvests in entire regions. And this can result in famine and destruction. A few years ago, I think it was during the pandemic, in the Horn of Africa, hordes of locusts decimated the livelihoods of farmers and created food shortages around the world and health and environmental issues for that area. It was getting kind of weird because we had plagues and locusts, and it's like, what's going on? Must be the gate fault. This is all to say that I would suggest that perhaps the writer here isn't using the grasshopper metaphor to comment on our relationship to God, but rather perhaps as a commentary on the capacity of human beings for beauty as well as destruction, which is what the grasshopper represents. Perhaps the comparison is less about being squished like a bug by God or God watching from a safe distance, and more about remembering that we are a part of a larger ecosystem and that the divine spirit intends for us to behave as the creative and beautiful grasshopper rather than the destructive locust. If the last several years have taught us anything, it's that we as a species hold within ourselves the capacity for incredible selflessness and compassion, as well as shocking cruelty and destruction and indifference to the needs of others. That might explain the movement in chapter of Isaiah from grasshoppers in one verse to addressing the privileged and the rulers of the world in the next verse. Those in power, it tells us. And here, the writer is probably referring to King Nebuchadnezzar, who was the Babylonian ruler who was responsible for the deportation of the Jewish people into Babylon. But those in power are notorious for overreaching the authority granted to them by the people to the detriment and the health and the well-being of those people. It's not that God will squish us like bugs if we don't do enough. That might be how we operate as a people, whether in foreign policy, or our justice system, or in parenting, or through our destructive form of capitalism. But there is too much passion and care weaving through this week's text to think that those things are the nature of the divine. Rather, we are reading of a weariness, of a struggle in body and spirit that comes from collective trauma and sorrow. And we read of the divine spirit intervening with the tools that are at God's disposal. And those tools are vision and creativity and a compassion for those who are at the end of their own strength and at the end of their basic needs, emotional needs, as well as physical needs. God doesn't relate to us as, like, say, capitalism does, as our definitions of success would have us believe. The mandate of the divine spirit is not do more. The mandate of the divine spirit is not keep pushing yourself until you're driven to exhaustion because you're trying to attain some mythical level of success. The mandate of the divine spirit is something more like be kind. Create communities of solidarity. Turn toward the things that promote life, not just for yourself, but for everyone. And sometimes the mandate of the divine spirit is simply this: do nothing. Breathe. Today's text says that sometimes we need to wait on God. And through that waiting, the text says we find power. Now, this idea of doing nothing finds its roots in Taoism. And Taoism is a religion that predates the Babylonian exile by about 5 centuries. And within Taoism, there is a concept called Wu Wei, which is simply translated as non-action. That sometimes, by doing nothing, perhaps the answer to a problem presents itself, or we are given an opportunity to breathe, to center ourselves, to gather our strength. And this text from Isaiah drives home the point that we actually betray the image of God when we deny this to ourselves and to others, when we buy into this myth of the grind and expect that same thing for those around us. When we deny ourselves and others rest, when we deny ourselves and others compassion and patience, then we are then acting like the locust and not the grasshopper. There is so much pain in the world. And while the divine spirit and the divine spark within us meets this pain with compassion and connection, we are also invited to leave behind everything that continues to threaten our well-being and the well-being of our neighbors for a more transformative world where those who are not winning, those who are growing faint and exhausted, they are also strengthened and empowered and can run and not get weary and walk and never tire. The work of imagining a different way, a radically different way to exist in this world. It's difficult. It's not easy. And it's wrought with resistance from everywhere. How we're schooled, what our jobs expect of us, what our families can expect of us sometimes, what our friends might expect of us. It's often overwhelming. According to Isaiah, God, the divine spirit, is entirely with us in that work. May it be so.
You spread out the skies over empty space. I said, let there be light. To a dark and formless world, your light was born. You spread out your arms over empty hearts. I said, let there be light. To a dark and hopeless world, your son was born. You made the world and saw that it was good. You sent your only son, for you are good. What a wonderful maker. What a wonderful Savior. How majestic your whisper. How humble your love. With a strength like no other. And the heart of the Father. How majestic your whispers. What a wonderful God. No eyes fully seen how beautiful the cross. We have only heard the faintest whispers of how great you are. You made the world and saw that it was good. You sent your only son, for you are good. What a wonderful maker. majestic your whisper. How humble your love. With a strength like no other. And the heart of a mother. How majestic your whispers. What a wonderful God. What a wonderful God. What a wonderful God. What a wonderful
Let's open the floor to our questions for contemplation this morning. And the first one is simply, what might be the difference between the idea of God sitting on high, looking down on us, as one would, as Isaiah says, insects, versus God operating amidst a community? What kind of different features would we see in a God that is sort of on high versus a God that is sort of amidst us?
I think I would think of it more as a God that was working with us and sure with us, and rather than just almost judging on high.
I was going to say something similar, but the judgment thing, I think that's where that comes from, is that the viewpoint of he's up there and we're down here.
Right.
As opposed to being inspired by working together and that more positive way of thinking.
Are there any like comforting elements that might come with the idea of a God sitting on high? Yeah.
I think that the idea of God on high has another element beyond judgment. Mm-hmm. When I think about it, it's the idea of a farther perspective than I might have that might say, this is where you are right now, but I know where you're going or what could be, but it only feels that way when it's married with the idea of present with me as well.
Yeah.
So it's the both and, like, I'm with you as you move in this direction.
Yes.
And I shepherd you in that direction, not just sit and leave you alone.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I use the example of the show Kung Fu, and there is some validity, right, to the idea of other people having more experience, maybe more time on this earth, and that is not necessarily a separate hierarchical thing that someone is looking down on us, but it's the concept of good parenting, right? We bring our experience to the lives of our children to help them learn and grow. Now, depending on how that's done, right? It's the context. There are parental experiences that people have had that have been very abusive, very as I say, very hierarchical. But there are parenting experiences where a parent invests in their child. There might be a certain separation because of age and experience, right? But there is some good to be gleaned from that concept. I think the idea is, how do we marry, those two ideas of a God that has a further perspective, but also a God that is amidst us?
Yeah. I think also when we live in a world where it's hard to get along with people sometimes, if we remember that God is with us, then God is in each of us. And so when we're in the workplace or we go around to places, that it's easier and it's to think about being kinder to people because there's God in each of us, and to remember that within each person, people are going through things, and to forgive people, to accept people, and to remember that if God's within us and we are at fault and that there's flaws within us, certainly that people are going through their own things as well. So to keep that in mind.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, very good. Okay, so the second question is Wu Wei, as I said in my message, is the Taoist concept of non-action. And in today's text from Isaiah, the translation of those who wait for Yahweh is actually not translated as waiting on God to do the work. It's not, okay, I'm going to sit here and let God do everything. It's waiting on God's empowerment so we can do the work as well. Waiting on God's resources so that we can do the work alongside the divine spirit. Why can it be so difficult for some people, myself included, within society to simply wait? Why is that a hard concept for us today?
I thought this was really interesting because I think there are situations that call for immediate action and reaction. Mm-hmm. When safety's involved, we want to be reactionary. Mm-hmm. But I think often we tend to be very reactionary to a situation without clearly thinking through it, giving attention and time. Mm-hmm. And we're such a society of immediate gratification. Mm-hmm. That being able to breathe and take that moment, I just thought that was really interesting. So
thank you. Yeah.
I think it's built into our society, and we're often described by other societies as a nation of doers, not thinkers. Mm-hmm. So we tend to want to immediately address the problem without contemplating it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of wired into our educational system. It's sort of wired into how we operate on the job, right?
Did it bring up for anybody else, the element of control? That if we are doing something that we feel like we have control over the situation, and that's kind of an illusion anyway. I think we get further from God when we think that we can control any outcome.
Thank you for that observation.
Yeah. And in silence, we can, there is power as we view the process, and we attend to each other. Yeah. If we're silent.
Yeah, absolutely. Silence is incredibly valuable. Finding those times where you can just close everything out, meditate, pray, whatever the word that you want to use, or nothing, just be, right? Those are very, very powerful. Rebecca?
I'm going back to the on the high because I have very out of box thinking. It's kind of along the lines of what he said. Mm-hmm. I feel like he's more of on high of his love, and he wants us to be on that high as well.
Oh, nice. Right on. Yeah, thank you. Hippie. All very good observations, everyone. Thank you very, very much.
I don't want to hog the microphone, but Pastor Jess, you're asking the question about God being on high versus being, present and with us. And I just had this picture of, I have an 11-year-old son, and it was like one of those epiphany moments for me in my journey of faith. When he was an infant, he was a really good baby, but maybe there were 2 nights I couldn't get him to calm down crying, right? And I'm just holding him and rocking him. And it just, the whole picture of God holding us. I could explain to my infant in the clearest language possible that he was hungry or his stomach was upset and he was going to be fine in a couple hours and he could just go to sleep. I could tell him everything he needs to know. He can't understand me. There's a gap in our capacity for understanding between me and my infant child. You just got to trust that I love you and I'm here and I'm holding you. It's not a problem of my ability to communicate my love to you. You just can't comprehend how infinite it is, right? But I'm here and I'm holding you and I love you. And I just think like the distance between me and my infant child is so small compared to me and the divine, right? So I love this line in the bridge of this song. Have I tried to scale your walls in vain? To cross your seas, I've pushed against your waves. What for all the miles have you to say? Were you there beside me the whole way? River of gladness, fill my soul. Jesus, you're my greatest thought. God, I know. I see the light. I see the lightning. I hear your voice inside the cracking thunder. Singing, nothing stands between us. Oh, nothing stands between us. The love now. Nothing stands between us. Oh, nothing stands between us. The love. The river of gladness, take control. There's a cup of joy for every taste of sorrow. I see the light. I see the lightning. I hear your voice inside the cracking thunder. Singing, nothing stands between us. Oh, nothing stands between us but love now. Oh, nothing stands between us. Oh, nothing stands between us but love. Have I tried to scale your walls in vain? To cross your seas, I've pushed against your waves. What for all the mouths have you to say? Were you there beside me this whole way? You always find me in between the thunder and the lightning. You always find me in between the thunder and the lightning. Always find me in between the thunder and the lightning. Always find me in between the thunder and the
May we remember the love of the divine is attentive, not avoidant, patient, but not passive. It is biased toward justice, urging and luring and drawing all life toward liberation. The love of God will be known through those that practice care, who manifest courage, and who move us honestly and humbly together toward freedom from oppression. May it be so among us as the Spirit companions us with peace. May it be so. Amen. Have a wonderful week.